Okay. Hey, Mark. How are you?
Hi, Doug. Pretty good. How are you?
Great. Thank you for coming on the show. Nice to have you here.
Great to be here.
So, on your bio, it says that you're a scientist, author, and adventurer. Tell me about the scientist part first.
Yes, so I've worked, almost 3 decades in the pharmaceutical industry, developing drugs. A lot of my time has been in neuroscience. So I worked at a number of big pharmas, and now I work at a startup biotech company. I have a PhD in pharmaceutical chemistry.
Did you work on the COVID vaccines at all? Were you involved in that?
My company worked on the COVID vaccines. We didn't get very far. Pfizer had way more resources than we had to do something like that. So we kind of left it up to Big Pharma.
And then adventurer. Are you an adventure traveler?
I think my publicist put adventure in there, but it really comes down to making sure that I visit the places that I write about. So, if I wrote about London, I went to London and I visited the different places that my characters would be. If I write about Virginia, I've been all through Virginia, making sure that I'm familiar with the setting. So I know how to make it as accurate as possible.
So, author. You've got a series called Matt Miller in the Colonies series. I saw there were 4 books, 5 books.
Yeah. So the fourth book just came out last week. So yeah, there are 4 books in the series. They're available in 3 different formats. They're the ebook, so you can get them for Kindle, and then there's a print version, and then the audio book for the fourth book will be out in a couple of weeks.
I just read over that briefly. So, this is time traveling.
Yeah, it's kind of a merger between time travel and historical fiction. The first 2 books, people have complained that there's not quite enough time travel, but definitely some people enjoy that part of it. And then the last 2 books are a little more kind of scientific, and again talking about time travel.
Okay, so where did the character Matt Miller come from?
Matt Miller was a character that I created because of a scenario I've had in my head for quite a long time. And the scenario is that we walk around, and I've wondered this ever since I was a small child, how things work. And every day we use these brilliant machines. We use our iPhones. We put them in a plug. We plug them in, and we charge them up, and we don't have a clue of how things work. I grew up working on cars, and if I open up the hood of my BMW now, I have no idea how to fix that car if it stops. And so the concept was, well, if like I'm supposed to be educated, and if I got dropped somewhere, and I'm supposed to know how to make medicines, would I be able to survive? With the idea that I use all these modern conveniences, and I just assume things are going to be in place. So the idea came from that. It came from uh, kind of the concept of dropping a young scientist into an environment where he didn't have any modern conveniences. Knowing what I know, would he be able to make his way in the world?
It's an interesting concept. I was having a conversation like this the other day with my producer, and we were talking about how man is probably the most ill-equipped species on the planet to deal with change. And it could be climate change, it could be technological change, any of it. And we got into the conversation about electricity, where basically man has lived with electricity for 150 years, and we lived
Yeah,
centuries before without it. Okay?
right.
Imagine the world if all of a sudden all the electric went out.
Well,
It would be
right.
total chaos. It would be like the apocalypse, right?
Right, because none of us really know how it gets to our house. We know it's generated someplace and it comes through the wires, but after that, and then some of us know that it's created by either nuclear power plants or coal fueled power plants, and we talk about that all the time. But really, do we have any idea how they make the electricity?
Well, not
No,
only to make it, but
right?
try surviving without it. I mean, the people in the cold
Yeah, well,
countries
that too.
would freeze to death. The people in the hot countries would heat to death.
Yeah,
Uh, Cooking, I mean, people would have to go back to burning wood in a wood stove to cook their food. It would just be total chaos. And we were laughing because years before that, people were fine. They lived for
Right.
centuries.
Right.
There's something here on your bio that I'm alluding to. There's a quote on here. I'm just going to read it. Technology pulls us apart and fragments us. No matter how much society advances through technology, our basic humanity remains constant and all-powerful. We have a fundamental need for community and the security that it represents. I find that statement very ironic because I'm old enough to remember when the internet first came to be. And I was so optimistic and so happy, thinking, wow, this is going to be the thing that unites the world, because now we can all talk to each other, we can do Skype, things like this. And it's really had the opposite effect. And I can't figure out why. Why do you suppose, now that we can all connect to each other, the world is more divided than it ever seemed to be?
Yeah, I don't want to get too ethereal and spiritual about this, but kind of part of my books is exploring human consciousness and our interactions with the world. And I think there's something about actually physical proximity. And when we start actually shielding ourselves from that and interacting with individuals, fellow human beings, without actually having that physical proximity, I think there's something about the relationship that changes, right? I'm a neuroscientist, and so your brain is quite amazing. We don't, that's an understatement, and we don't understand how our brains work. We don't how they function in this quantum world that we live in. But I'm becoming more and more convinced that, we actually need to interact, within some physical distance to really make the same connections that we used to make. And it's not just like an emotional thing. It's not a feeling thing. I think there's some real actual energetic connections that we make when we're in communities. When we're at a rock concert, what's the difference between watching the rock concert on your high definition screen at home and actually being there? Okay, and if we can quantify that, and I know there's a scientific reason for it, and if we can quantify that, I think it'll come to answering your question.
Well, certainly one of the differences is you can control the volume.
That could be, right? And yeah, having so much control, maybe that's not how humans are supposed to interact.
Well, I think I agree with you. People now are communicating through their phones with text and TikTok videos and things in lieu of personal contact. And I think that the kids growing up now are having more trouble than ever actually dealing with people for real, in person.
Well, I think that we say, well, for instance, I think that online we say things that we would never say to someone's face.
True. Yeah.
And then just the simplest thing like asking a woman on a date. It used to be that you picked up a phone and you went through that whole process. You were pretty committed to it because you had to talk to her parents. She had to answer the phone. You had to think what you were going to say. And now, sort of that whole human process is gone, and it turns into a text. Hey, do you want to meet? Something like that. And you don't go through that human interaction anymore. And I don't know if one's better than another, but it's different for sure.
I don't think we as human beings have digested the amount of technology that's being thrown at us. I think we're well behind it. There's still
and I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Let me get back to Matt Miller. So now you said that this is time travel. So why is he time traveling?
Well, he gets caught up in we'll say a reactor accident. There's always has to be something that makes people kind of move into some quantum-oriented scientific reason that they time travel. And so it's a result of an accident. He wakes up in 1762 Virginia on a horse farm, and he wonders where he is. And it takes him a while to kind of sort it out. But once he realizes he realizes he's in 1762, and immediately he's like, how do I get back? Then the complication is that he winds up falling in love with a young farm girl, and suddenly he's, he has some reticence about actually returning home, and he eventually makes. Well, I won't get into what decision he makes, but that's part of it.
Okay, so he has no control over the time travel. It just sort of takes
No,
him.
no, it's part of an accident, but I'll say he does have control over whether or not he can come back.
Oh, okay.
And so then he has to make some decisions based on where he is. Can he survive? Um, and as we were just talking about, with all the modern conveniences we have, you could, if you went back to 1762 Virginia, you wouldn't really have any skills that were of any value. You weren't a farmer, you weren't a blacksmith, any number of kinds of trades that we have no concept of doing anymore. Right?
Candle maker. There's a
Yeah. Oh,
skill.
yes, candle maker.
Yeah. Do you remember a show in the 1960s called Time Tunnel? Are you old enough?
Yes, I do remember that show. As a young boy watching it or reruns of it, it was with the spinning wheel kind of thing, right? That they jump into.
That it was that sort of hypnotic,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, spiral
yeah,
vortex thing. You just reminded me of that when you were talking about that because they had no control over it. It was some weird fluke with the machine that they got stuck in it. And every time they tried to bring him back, they threw him somewhere else in time.
yeah. And it turns out people love fish out of water. It's a fish out of water story, and it turns out people love those stories. And they're willing to kind of follow a character who doesn't seem to have any concept of what's going on and watch them sort through. And maybe that's a little bit of the inspiration of Matt Miller and the Colonies.
So you're up to 4 books. How many do you anticipate there are going to be in this series, or do you know?
I don't know. This may be the last one. I have to kind of figure out now where I want to go. The fourth book took a lot out of me because I wanted it to be the best of the four. So a lot more research, kind of a lot more thinking about science and time travel and human consciousness and the universe and God. And I don't know where the fifth book is going to go. I mean, it's right in the middle, right before the American Revolution. So there could be something there.
Okay. When did you start this series? How long ago?
I think it was back in 2010, maybe, is when I first started writing. I remember specifically, I was sitting in a hotel room on a business trip for the big pharma that I was working on at the time, and they just announced impending layoffs. And my boss called me and said, stay by make sure you check your email. We don't know whose job is safe. And I said, I'm tired of this. And so I sat down and I wrote the first chapter. But I didn't touch it. It was over a couple of years, and I didn't touch it. And then finally, I sat down and said, "Yeah, I think I want to write this whole book."
Mark, we are out of time. We've got to wrap this up. Thank you so much for coming on. My guest is Mark J. Rose. The book is called Matt Miller in the Colonies. This is a series, and the fourth book is called Architect. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
And the book is out, you said, right?
Yes.
All right. Last question. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
Yeah, so you can reach me and subscribe to my newsletter as well as get the links for all the books on markjroseauthor.com. All one word, markjroseauthor.com.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on this show. This was an interesting conversation, and best of luck with your series.
Thanks a lot, Doug. I appreciate it.